I cost my arrogant millionaire neighbor $250,000. Not with a lawsuit, not with blackmail, but with a single tiny piece of metal that I custom machined in my own garage and personally installed in the heart of his greatest pride and joy. I turned his luxurious golden pool into his own personal financial hell, and the most beautiful part of it all is that he personally paid me to do it. My name is Frank, and I'm a plumber. I don't just mean I fix leaky faucets. I'm a master plumber, a craftsman. I solve complex hydraulic problems that leave other so called experts scratching their heads. In a world of cheap fixes and disposable parts, I believe in doing a job right, with precision and permanence. My work is my art, and my tools are my instruments. I live a quiet life in a modest but comfortable house. I provide for my family, and I take immense pride in the reputation I've built over 20 years. A reputation for being the guy you call when no one else can figure it out. But before I get into the intricate details of my masterpiece of revenge, you need to understand the man who deserved it. You need to understand the kind of casual cruelty that can push a patient man to his breaking point. This is just the beginning of how it all unraveled, so make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because you won't want to miss a single detail of how this story ends. His name was Richard. He lived in the sprawling mansion next to my humble home. Richard was new money and he made sure everyone knew it. He drove a different luxury car for every day of the week, wore watches that cost more than my truck, and had the kind of smug, condescending smile that made you want to wipe it off his face with a wrench. From the day he moved in, he treated me and my family not like neighbors, but like something he'd scraped off the bottom of his $1,000 shoes. The war started with small things. My work van, my pride and joy, which I kept immaculately clean and organized, was the first target. To him, it was an eyesore. I started getting anonymous complaints filed with the Homeowners Association. Commercial vehicle parked in a residential area. The letters would read, even though I parked it in my own driveway, and it was my sole means of earning a living. He knew it was me, and I knew it was him. He wanted to make it clear that a blue-collar worker like me didn't belong in his neighborhood. Then it escalated. I take great pride in my lawn. My son and I would spend Saturday mornings mowing and edging it. One week, a perfect 10-foot-long strip of my grass along the property line suddenly turned yellow and died. Richard, while spraying his own pristine turf with some industrial-grade weed killer, had accidentally let the sprayer drift over onto my property. When I calmly approached him about it, he didn't even look at me. He just shrugged. Accidents happen, and walked away, leaving me to explain to my confused son why our lawn was suddenly sick. He would complain about the noise of me cutting a piece of pipe in my own garage on a Saturday afternoon, yet would have no problem hosting massive, loud parties that went on until 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. He was a hypocrite and a bully wrapped in a package of designer clothes and fake charm. He never saw me as a person. I was just the plumber next door, an inconvenience, a blemish on his perfect, manicured world. For years I swallowed my anger. A direct confrontation would be pointless. A man like Richard doesn't listen to reason. He only understands power and money. Fighting him on his terms with lawyers and HOA complaints would be a long, expensive, and losing battle. I knew that if I was ever going to get my justice, it had to be on my terms. Not in a courtroom, but in my world. The world of pipes, pressure, and physics. A world he knew nothing about. I just needed to be patient and wait for the perfect opportunity. And then, one perfect, sun-drenched afternoon, the fly walked right into the spider's web. His golden, glorious, gaudy swimming pool broke down, and his usual team of high-priced pool specialists was completely stumped. It was a Saturday morning. I was in my driveway cleaning my tools and reorganizing my van when I saw him. Richard stood on the edge of his perfectly manicured lawn, hesitating. He was wearing a silk polo shirt and linen shorts that probably cost more than my entire monthly mortgage payment. For a moment, he just stared, his jaw tight, as if trying to build up the courage to cross the invisible line that separated his world from mine. Finally, with a deep sigh of defeat, he walked over. He didn't greet me. He just stopped a few feet away, avoiding eye contact, and said, "You're a plumber, right?" I slowly wiped a wrench with a clean rag, taking my time before looking up at him. "Master plumber," I corrected him calmly. "Is there something I can help you with, Richard?" I made sure to use his first name. It was a small thing, but it chipped away at the wall of superiority he tried to maintain. He winced. "My pool. Something's wrong with the heating and circulation system. It's complicated." He waved a dismissive hand as if the details were beneath him. "I've had the best people out here. The company that installed it, a specialist from the city. Nobody can figure it out. They're all useless." I could almost taste the sweet irony. The best people had failed him. And now here he was, standing in front of the eyesore van he'd tried so hard to get rid of, asking for my help. I continued cleaning my wrench, letting the silence hang in the air for an uncomfortably long time. I wanted him to squirm. I wanted him to ask properly. "So," he finally grumbled, "I was told you're good with tricky problems. Are you interested in taking a look or not?" The words sounded like they were physically hurting him to say. I placed the wrench carefully into its designated slot in my toolbox. "I'm pretty busy, Richard. My schedule is booked out for the next 2 weeks. Tricky problems take time, and my regular clients depend on me." Panic flickered in his eyes. For a man like him, being told no was a foreign concept. The pool was his centerpiece, the venue for his arrogant parties. A broken pool was a crack in his perfect facade. "I'll pay double your usual rate," he blurted out, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Whatever it is, just come take a look. Name your price." That was it. The moment I had been waiting for. The moment he put a price on his desperation. I finally gave him my full attention, looking him directly in the eye. A slow smile spread across my face. "All right, Richard," I said. "I think I can squeeze you in. I'll come by tomorrow morning to diagnose the problem. My consultation fee is $500, payable up front, whether I take the job or not." He choked for a second, his face turning a shade of red that clashed horribly with his expensive shirt. $500 just to look? I knew for a fact his specialist probably charged less, but he was trapped. He nodded stiffly, turned on his heel, and stalked back to his mansion without another word. As I watched him go, I felt a cold, calm certainty wash over me. The war had just begun, and I was about to choose the battlefield. And that battlefield was going to be his precious golden pool. The next morning, I rang his doorbell at precisely 9 a.m. Richard answered, looking like he'd been waiting by the door, and led me through his ridiculously oversized house to the backyard without a word. And then I saw it. It wasn't a swimming pool, it was a monument to his ego, carved into the earth and filled with shimmering, crystal clear water. He called it his golden pool, and now I understood why. The entire thing was lined with tiny, iridescent Italian mosaic tiles that shimmered under the morning sun, giving the water a distinct golden hue. It was an infinity pool, its edge seeming to merge seamlessly with the distant horizon. At night, a custom fiber optic lighting system could make it look like a galaxy of stars was twinkling beneath the surface. He immediately launched into a monologue of self-praise. "Custom design took them a year to build it," he boasted, gesturing grandly. "The underwater speakers are German, top of the line. The entire system, heating, pH balance, lighting, it's all automated and controlled from an app on my phone. Cost me more than your house plumber." He said that last part with a smirk, clearly trying to put me in my place. But he didn't intimidate me. He just showed me his weakness. He saw a toy, a status symbol to show off at his lavish parties. I saw something else entirely. I saw a complex circulatory system, a heart in the form of a massive water pump, veins and arteries made of copper and PVC stretching out beneath hundreds of tons of concrete. And I knew from years of experience that even the most powerful, expensive systems have a single point of failure. "Show me the pump room," I said, my voice flat and professional. He led me to a small, climate-controlled shed, hidden by manicured bushes. Inside wasn't the damp, cluttered space you'd normally find. It was immaculate, like a laboratory or the engine room of a spaceship. A symphony of humming pumps, glowing digital displays, and perfectly organized, color-coded pipes filled the room. For any other plumber, it would have been a nightmare. For me, it was a schematic laid bare. My eyes traced the lines, understanding the flow of water, the heating cycles, the filtration loops. While he was pointing at a ridiculously expensive German filter system, my mind was already dissecting his prize. I could see its vulnerabilities. I could see exactly where a tiny, insignificant, and completely undetectable wound could be inflicted. A wound that would make this golden pool slowly, expensively, and incurably bleed him dry. I spent the next hour putting on a show. I ran diagnostic cycles, tapped gauges, listened to the hum of the pumps with a stethoscope, and made thoughtful notes on a clipboard. Richard hovered behind me, radiating impatience. He couldn't stand seeing someone else in control of his domain, especially a man like me. All the while, my mind was racing, designing the perfect, elegant little device that would become his nightmare. After about 20 minutes, I found the real problem. It was laughably simple. A tiny calcium deposit, no bigger than a grain of rice, was partially clogging the intake line for the main pressure sensor. It was causing the system to get faulty readings, which in turn was making the heater cycle on and off erratically. For me, it was a 10-minute fix. I could have scraped it clean with a pocket knife and been home for lunch. But instead, I'd left the tiny obstruction right where it was. This was the justification I needed. I stood up slowly, a grim, serious expression on my face, and turned to face him. "Well, I've found the issue," I said gravely. "And?" he snapped. "What is it? Can you fix it?" "It's not that simple, Richard," I said, shaking my head with feigned disappointment. "This is a classic case of thermal acoustic resonance. Your German heating element is so powerful that it's creating micro vibrations in the main manifold. The stock pressure regulators just can't handle it. They're failing, which is what's causing your system to go haywire." I was spouting complete and utter nonsense, but I delivered it with the dead serious confidence of a surgeon explaining a complex operation. I could see his eyes glaze over at the technical jargon, which was exactly what I wanted. He was a man who respected things he couldn't understand as long as they sounded expensive. "So what's the solution?" he asked, his voice laced with frustration. "The solution," I said, pointing to a perfectly fine junction in the copper piping, "is to install a custom calibrated bypass valve right here. It's a specialized component that will absorb those micro vibrations and stabilize the pressure across the entire system. It's not something you can just buy at a supply store. It needs to be precisely machined and tuned to the specific frequency of your system." He was hooked. He bought the story completely. "Fine," he said. "Get it. Order it. I don't care what it costs. Just fix the problem." "I can't just order it," I replied, delivering the final, crucial piece of my plan. "But I know a small specialist workshop in the next state that fabricates custom parts for high-end systems like this. I can send them the schematics. It will take me a couple of days to make it in my shop, and my labor isn't cheap." "Just do it," he snarled, already pulling out his wallet. He thought he was paying for an exclusive solution from an expert. He had no idea he was about to commission the creation of his own personal Trojan Horse, and I was going to be the one to build it. I spent the next 2 days in my workshop. My garage is my sanctuary, a place of order and creation, the polar opposite of Richard's sterile mansion. For this project, I wasn't just a plumber. I was an artist crafting his masterpiece. The custom calibrated bypass valve I was building had to look perfect, absolutely professional, and utterly convincing. I milled the valve body from a solid block of marine-grade brass, polishing it to a mirror shine. I used high-end compression fittings and made sure every single thread was perfectly cut. From the outside, it was a beautiful, over-engineered piece of plumbing, but its heart held a secret. Deep inside the valve, hidden from any inspection port, I installed the soul of my creation, a tiny bimetallic strip, no thicker than a fingernail. It was a simple principle of physics I'd learned about years ago. The strip was made of two different metals, steel and copper, laminated together. When the hot water from the pool's powerful heater flowed past it, the copper would expand just a fraction of a millimeter more than the steel. This subtle difference would cause the strip to bend, to warp, just barely. And that tiny movement would open a microscopic channel, a pinhole I had drilled with a watchmaker's bit. When the water was cold, the channel would be perfectly sealed. But when the heater was on, it would open up, allowing a tiny, almost imperceptible weep of water. Not a drip, not a leak, but a slow, silent bleed. On the third day, I returned to Richard's house. He watched my every move, his arms crossed, a look of deep suspicion on his face as if he was expecting me to steal his silver spoons. I worked with methodical precision. I shut down the system, drained the main manifold, and with clean, practiced cuts, I removed a section of the main copper pipe. Then, with the reverence of a surgeon, I installed my creation. It fit perfectly. While he was momentarily distracted by an urgent phone call, pacing by the pool and yelling at some poor soul on the other end, I performed the final critical step. With a long, flexible pick, I reached deep into the main intake line and, in less than 3 seconds, flicked the tiny calcium deposit, the real, original problem, away. It dissolved instantly into the water flow. I turned the main breaker back on. The system hummed to life. The pumps whirred, the digital displays glowed green, and the heater kicked on. No errors, no fluctuating pressure. It was perfect. Richard ended his call and stared at the monitors. "Is that it?" he asked. "That's it," I confirmed. "The bypass valve is absorbing the resonance. Your system is now perfectly stable." He handed me the check, not a word of thanks. He just wanted me and my van gone from his perfect property. I walked away, the heavy check in my pocket, feeling the cold satisfaction of a job well done. The bomb was planted. Now all I had to do was wait for it to slowly, silently, and very, very expensively go off. For 3 weeks, there was a blissful, infuriating silence. I'd see Richard out in his yard, strutting around the edge of his pool like a king surveying his kingdom. He even threw one of his obnoxious parties, the sound of bad music and forced laughter drifting over the fence late into the night. Through a gap in the hedge, I saw him raise a glass and a toast, standing right next to his golden pool, the shimmering, perfectly functioning symbol of his wealth. He thought he had won. He thought he'd thrown enough money at the problem to make it go away. He had no idea the real problem had just begun. Then I started to notice it. It wasn't something you could see, but something you could hear. Late at night when the world was quiet, I could pick up a faint, almost inaudible sound coming from his property. It was a soft, gentle hiss, the sound of water flowing through a small pipe. It was the sound of his automatic water filler. A pool loses some water to evaporation, especially in the summer. The autofiller is supposed to kick on for a few minutes a day, maybe an hour at most, to top it off. But this sound was different. It was nearly constant. It was the sound of his pool working tirelessly, day and night, to replace the water that was silently vanishing into the ground beneath his pump house. A few gallons an hour, every day. He wouldn't notice the water bill at first. A man like him probably had it on autopay. An extra $100 a month would be a rounding error to him. But he would notice the other effects. You see, when you are constantly adding fresh, untreated city water into a perfectly balanced chemical ecosystem like a high-end pool, you are waging a silent war against it. The constant dilution was slowly but surely destroying the pool's pH balance, rendering his expensive chemicals useless. One morning, about a month after my repair, I saw the first visual sign, a faint greenish tint clouding the edges of his golden tiles. Algae. It was just a hint of it, but for a pool that was supposed to be as sterile as an operating room, it was a declaration of war. His pool had contracted a chronic, incurable disease, and the expensive chemical treatments he would soon be pouring into it would be nothing more than temporary painkillers. The slow bleed had begun. The first sign that Richard's panic was setting in was the arrival of a gleaming white van with Aqualux Premium Pool Systems written on the side in gold lettering. It was the original installation company. Two men in crisp collared shirts got out, carrying shiny toolboxes and complex-looking electronic gadgets. Of course, he wouldn't call me. His pride would never allow him to admit that my fix might have failed. He would rather pay a fortune to the professionals who had already failed him once. I watched from my kitchen window as they spent the entire day at his property. They ran a full diagnostic on his computer system. They took water samples. I saw them hook up a pressure testing rig to the main lines, a device that pressurizes the pipes with air to find leaks. I just smiled and sipped my coffee. A pressure test is designed to find a real leak, a faulty gasket, a cracked pipe, something that causes a noticeable drop in pressure over 30 minutes. My creation wasn't a leak. It was a phantom. It only bled water under specific thermal conditions, and even then, the amount was so minuscule it would never register on their gauges. They would blame the tiny pressure drop on temperature changes or air bubbles in the line. Late in the afternoon, I heard his voice, raised in anger, carrying across the lawn. He was arguing with the technicians. A few minutes later, they packed up their shiny equipment and left, shaking their heads. They had found nothing. Their official diagnosis, I later guessed, was significant evaporation due to an unusually hot summer. They probably charged him $1,000 for that brilliant piece of insight. A week later, a different van showed up. This one belonged to Precision Leak Detection, Inc. This guy was a specialist, armed with sensitive acoustic equipment designed to listen for the sound of water escaping underground. He spent hours with headphones on, walking slowly around the pool deck like a bomb disposal expert, pressing his microphone to the concrete. He found nothing, because the water wasn't escaping from the main pipes under the deck. It was weeping silently from my beautiful brass valve right inside the pump house, where it trickled down a drain pipe I had noticed during my initial inspection. It was the perfect crime scene, leaving no evidence behind. He left, handing Richard another substantial bill for his time. After that came the pool chemistry guru, who sold him hundreds of dollars worth of useless, specialized chemicals to combat the algae. Each visit was a new act in the tragic comedy unfolding next door. Richard was surrounded by experts, yet he had never been more alone with his problem. He was spending a fortune, and all he was buying was more confusion and deeper frustration. The war for the Golden Pool soon entered a new phase. The enemy was no longer just algae, it was the very air itself. My slow, patient bleed of hot water inside the enclosed pump house had created a tropical microclimate. The air was constantly thick, damp, and warm. And that kind of environment is the mortal enemy of sophisticated electronics. First came the smell. A musty, swamp-like odor began to cling to the area around the pool equipment. Then the electronic gremlins started to appear. The beautiful, expensive fiber optic lights that twinkled like a submerged galaxy began to flicker and fail. One night, I saw a section of the pool deck lights shored out with a shower of sparks, plunging half of his pristine backyard into darkness. He brought in an electrician, another expensive expert for the parade. The man correctly identified the symptom. Severe humidity was causing condensation on the circuit boards, leading to short circuits and corrosion. His solution? An industrial-grade dehumidifier, a noisy, power-hungry beast that now had to run 24/7, adding another hefty sum to Richard's soaring utility bills. But the dehumidifier was just a band-aid on a gaping wound. It couldn't stop the relentless moisture. The final blow to his precious system came one Friday evening. I was on my patio when I heard a loud pop from his yard, followed by the smell of burnt plastic. The main control board, the expensive German-made brain that operated his lights, his underwater speakers, and his heating schedule, had finally fried. The next morning I saw him standing over the dead control panel, his face pale with fury. His high-tech marvel was now just a silent, murky pond. He had lost control. The app on his phone was useless. The lights were dead. The sound system was silent. His golden pool was becoming a golden coffin, a testament not to his wealth, but to his powerlessness. He had spent tens of thousands of dollars chasing ghosts, and in return, his greatest source of pride had been reduced to a stagnant, stinking money pit. His frustration was curdling into something darker, a desperate, simmering rage. The sound that woke me one Saturday morning wasn't party music or the hum of a pool pump. It was the violent, angry roar of a jackhammer. I looked out my window and saw a full construction crew in Richard's backyard. They had a mini excavator and were systematically tearing his perfect, expensive stone pool deck to pieces. This was it, the grand finale. I stood by my fence, partially hidden by the bushes, and watched the show. Richard was out there, but he wasn't the calm, arrogant man I knew. He was a man possessed. His designer clothes were spattered with mud, his hair was a mess, and his face was a mask of frantic paranoia. He was convinced the leak, the phantom leak that a half-dozen experts told him didn't exist, was buried deep under the concrete. He was literally tearing his world apart to find it. He paced back and forth like a caged animal, jabbing his finger at the ground, yelling orders at the foreman that made no sense. He was chasing a ghost, and the financial cost of this final act of desperation was astronomical. The crew, the equipment, the inevitable repair work. He was easily throwing another $50,000 into the pit, on top of the tens of thousands he'd already wasted. They dug trenches. They exposed the thick PVC pipes that fed his pool. The crew worked all day, turning his backyard paradise into a muddy, crater-filled war zone. And they found nothing. Not a drop. Not a damp spot. The pipes were perfect. Late in the afternoon, I saw the foreman approach Richard, holding up his hands in a gesture of surrender. I couldn't hear their words, but the body language was clear. "There's nothing here, sir." Richard just stared at him, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. Then something inside him snapped. He let out a raw, guttural scream of pure rage and frustration. He grabbed a sledgehammer from one of the workers and, with a wild cry, swung it with all his might against a remaining slab of the pristine stone decking, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. He swung again and again, his screams echoing through the quiet neighborhood, until he was exhausted. Finally, he dropped the hammer and just stood there, a defeated man in the middle of a war zone he had created, staring down at the ruin of his greatest treasure. He had lost. The pool had beaten him. He just didn't know that I was the one who had built his defeat. The jackhammers fell silent and never returned. For weeks, Richard's backyard remained a scar on the landscape, a muddy pit of broken concrete and exposed pipes. The golden pool was a stagnant green pond. The energy was gone from the house. There were no more parties, no more luxury cars pulling into the driveway. There was just a heavy, oppressive silence. About 2 months after the meltdown, a for sale sign appeared on his perfectly manicured front lawn. It was the white flag of surrender. I later heard from a real estate agent I know that he had to sell the house at a massive loss. The listing had to mention significant issues with the pool and surrounding deck, which scared away the wealthy buyers he was targeting. The very symbol of his status had become the anchor that sank the value of his entire property. He sold it quietly to a development company that likely planned to just tear the whole thing down. One day, the moving trucks came, and just like that, he was gone. And me? My life has never been better. My business is thriving. The story of Richard's haunted pool and the parade of experts who failed to fix it became a local legend among contractors. Without ever revealing my secret, my reputation as the guy who can solve the impossible problems that stump everyone else has only grown. I've had to hire 2 new people just to keep up with the demand. I paid off my mortgage early. My son has a brand new bike, and we spend our Saturdays enjoying our peaceful, quiet lawn. Sometimes when I'm sitting on my back patio, I look over at the empty mansion next door and think about what I did. I never laid a hand on him. I never said a single threatening word. I simply used my knowledge, my skills, the very things he looked down on me for, to give him exactly what he deserved. I built him a beautiful, intricate, and very expensive trap, and he walked right into it with his eyes wide open and his wallet out. So I have to ask you, did I do the right thing? Was my revenge justified, or did I go too far? What would you have done in my place? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm curious to hear what you think. And if you enjoyed this story of professional revenge, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story.